feel like Gordon Bombay would have taken his career to even further heights.
Everything's flashy, everything's cocaine, everything's
Fun.
Open wide for some soccer!
I don't care what your personal thoughts are at home. I care that you hate the
Call
Cowboys.
this college rule!
Welcome, everybody, to the Sports Experience Podcast. I'm Chris. This is Dom. Couple of comics just here talking sports because we love it. I'm hungover. Who we talking about today?
Well, Chris, number one, you're a professional
It's true.
because your hair.
And
Right.
I'm a little late, but I threw up, and then I'm here. They call it the Boot and Rally.
And you know what? This isn't the Garrison Hurst episode, but we do have another football player.
It's true. I don't know what it is with football players and me being unbelievably hungover.
Dom, you're going to need to finish the last 25 minutes.
Yep.
But anyway, we're talking today one of the best quarterbacks of the 90s, early 2000s, and a trailblazer, and somebody who had a very interesting journey to the NFL, a very interesting career, and well, as we'll get into later, wish someone who still were here with us.
Yes,
So,
very interesting just throughout because we're talking Steve McNair.
Steve McNair. Sorry, we went off on a little tangent, but that's kind of what we do.
But literally, his path is not like almost any other top quarterback. He is one of the first ones to really run and be really effective.
I don't think we'll ever see anyone, we'll get into it later, but anyone have that type of trajectory to the NFL at that position. At other positions, you'll forever see it because there are guys who happen to, grades or just poverty, things like that, but never a quarterback.
A starting quarterback.
Yeah, never like that. So Steve McNair, Steve Latrell McNair, born February 14th, Valentine's Day, 1973, in Mount Olive, Mississippi. He had four brothers, Fred, Jason, Michael, and Tim. Basically, as far as sports goes with Steve, growing up out there in country Mississippi, from Pee Wee to junior high to high school, he was always on a different level in all sports.
I saw
compared
that.
to other kids, just all sports.
It's one of those things where like he's 13 and he's dominating 15-year-old kids. You know what I mean? Like that was the kind of thing. And like you were saying, he was good across the board.
And his brothers were all great athletes.
Yep.
A lot of people compared him to his oldest brother, Fred. Said he was better, actually, than Fred. Everyone in the community rallied around him and his family, though.
Yep.
Whomever fathered all of these awesome kids, kudos. Kudos.
Don't know.
Did not find
Grew
out.
up in a very poor, they said they had like a thin tin roof. You know what I mean? So it was like not great. But I mean, I imagine the rural. But I imagine that's the way it was in Mississippi at that time. And what made him like this amazing man was this sports that because he was good at. What I thought was interesting, he was good at basketball, baseball, track and field, so much so that people were like thinking he was going to go to that next level in any one of those.
Yeah, he could have picked. He honestly could have picked, but he was a tough guy, very country strong, as we'll get into. Like he's like a Herschel Walker or a Bo Jackson.
Yeah.
Like as far as what was the story where he was in college and him and his brother, like, we don't like lifting weights. So we went up to the coach, and the coach said, all right, Steve, if you can bench press that 225, and he's like a freshman or sophomore, 10 times or a certain number of times, you won't have to lift weights ever again.
And
goes over and just does it and then goes back to taking a nap. So that was Steve McNair.
Yep.
His older brother, Fred, played college football at Alcorn State. He ended up making some practice squads there in the NFL. They actually called Steve, his first nickname was Air 2.
I know.
Fred was the original Air McNair.
I know, which I thought was interesting because I always thought his nickname was Air McNair, but his brother actually had that nickname.
I mean, it could have been Air 2 Electric Boogaloo once
true.
he goes to college football.
That's true.
Starts at Mount Olive High School in 1987. Like you said, four-sports star. They won the state football title as a junior in 1989 where he started at quarterback, free safety, handled the kickoffs, the punts, and returned the kicks and punts.
Well, sometimes they say they're a two-sided player, but he's literally on every single play that they have.
So the first thing I thought of when I read that was that episode of King of the Hill where Peggy goes, David is unteachable. The flying Hawaiian David Kalaiki Ali'i, and then Hank goes, well, Bobby, he doesn't just run the ball. He plays offense, defense, and returns punts. My wife's Polynesian.
He's the flying Polynesian.
But that's all I thought of was all the
tell you
stuff that he did was like a Swiss Army knife of a high school player.
Luann, ooh, if I was 2 years younger.
Well, he is your age, Luann.
I know.
Hey, where's my swank?
Oh, that's a great episode.
Oh, we got that foreign exchange student that kicks barefoot. I think we've all had enough out of that. I know we're going to talk about him being a quarterback, but I did want to add, in high school, he was a fantastic defensive back.
Yes, he had 15 interceptions.
His total actually tied Terrell Buckley, who was a star at Florida State, later a top 10 NFL draft pick, and also he played like 12 years in the NFL. He was a good cover corner.
Yeah.
He was actually picked by the Seattle Mariners in the 35th round of the 91 baseball draft.
Which we've seen this where they're just like, oh yeah, you're as athletic as we could ever hope for.
Right.
We're gonna spend one of these dead draft picks on a guy who's gonna play quarterback.
If something goes wrong, want to play left field next to Ken Griffey Jr.?
Yeah, exactly.
Like, but it was football.
Shit really went bad for him. He's playing left field next to Ken Griffey Jr.
What a horrible life. Jay Buhner's out there because the Yankees wanted Ken Phelps.
Ken Phelps. So good.
He was a super prep All-American, though, on offense and defense. The thing was, though, at 6'2", 200 pounds, so he has plenty of size to play quarterback. He's being scouted by almost all the schools in the South. Every single one. Every big program, every little program. Everybody wants him. The big-time SEC schools want him. They want him on full scholarship. They just want him to play defensive back or running back.
I was going to say, they don't want him to play this quarterback, which he himself, like, this is the time in his life that I really love, because I bet there was this people being like, oh, because he got a full scholarship to Florida.
He did.
Which,
as a probably play safety or cornerback.
And he literally was just like, no, I'm going to be quarterback at a smaller school because I know I can do it.
Somewhere I can play early. Somewhere where my brothers go.
I was just going to say, so he follows his brother to Alcorn State.
Alcorn State. I did
and-
want to point out one thing, though.
Well,
he was such an incredible and tough athlete that if he did make that decision where he went to a Florida or an Arkansas or wherever, or even a Florida State, and did play on defense or was carrying the ball, I can guarantee you he would have been a star in the NFL regardless.
I was going to say, you would see him in the NFL outside of like injury, whatever you want to talk about that, but like literally at running back too, I feel like, because
it would have been. I mean, when we talk about him running the ball in the NFL, it's just like, oh God, who wants to tackle that guy?
Mm-hmm.
So he starts as a freshman. This is the first of 4 straight seasons he's first team all SWAC, Southwestern Athletic Conference. He's freshman player of the year, SWAC MVP, almost 2,900 passing yards, 24 touchdowns passing, and 6 rushing touchdowns. So he's already a star in this smaller conference.
Yes. Because this is like one of those really small, because they are Division I, but they're
1AA.
They're 1AA. That's what it was.
Whatever they call him now. 92. Again, he's now the SWAC MVP, first team all SWAC. Over 3,500 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 516 yards rushing, and 10 touchdowns. They go to the 1AA playoffs. I mean, granted, they're annihilated, but what can you expect out of a school kind of this size at this point in the 90s?
I agree. But you see his numbers really starting to pop off, and sophomore is when you're like, oh, he's rushing for over 500 yards.
Yeah.
And the touchdowns where when they get in the red zone, it's such a ridiculous thing to be like, I'm just going to take it.
Oh, right.
Like, so,
guys, I got it.
Yes, I got this, boys.
I got it. And the thing was, he was so good. Like, it's watching a mutant play out there, I would assume, for that time period to see a quarterback that time. Because, like, no one had come out of that conference with that type of kind of skill at the quarterback position since probably Doug Williams.
And now, yes.
At Grambling in, like, the 70s.
But now the top quarterbacks all are almost his, like, makeup of being, like, they can go on their feet. They can, you know what I mean?
He was so far ahead of his time. Like, it's almost like the Charlie Ward thing.
Yes.
Where
he was the best. He was the best football player in New York. Best quarterback.
He's a little bit bigger than Charlie. A little more buffer than Charlie. Junior year, almost 3,200 pass yards, 22 touchdowns, 633 rushing touchdowns. So, like, and it's not that he's, like, just scrambling out of the pot. They're designing runs.
They're just like,
you're 200 pounds. The middle linebackers in this conference probably weigh as much as you, and you're just going to truck them.
Yes. And I bet they pound passing so much that it literally is just going to be so open for him to just take 8 and then be like, all right, let's see if you can take me. You know what I mean? It's, yeah.
Safety who's an accounting major.
Exactly.
Let's see what you're doing. It's like, sir, I weigh 140 pounds. I know.
Come here.
He was second team 1AA All-American that year, which leads into 94. And it was so fascinating to think because before the season even starts, the hype train's around him.
Yes.
The Heisman hype train. And that is not an award given to 1AA players.
No, not even like given, not even considered.
No.
Do you know what I mean? Like that's the thing where they're talking about him and they're like, I don't think we've ever had another player that were like considered at this level because they think it's like the division, it's a level below.
Exactly. So Sports Illustrated runs the Hand Him the Heisman article, which kind of it exposes a lot of people to him for the first time outside of the South, Mississippi, Alabama, that type of region. He's kind of nicked up this year, and the team doesn't perform as well as they had in years past, but 5,377 passing yards, 47 passing touchdowns, 904 rushing yards. Do you know what his yards per carry was?
No.
11.6.
That's what I mean.
9 rushing, 56 touchdowns.
But the team wasn't the best. That's the thing.
They made the playoffs.
Yeah.
They lost to eventual national champions Youngstown State. He was 1AA first team All-American. All the other accolades I said, he was all SWAC, SWAC MVP every single year. He did win the 1AA Heisman, though, the Walter Payton Award.
The Walter Payton Award, yes.
So
and got 3rd in the actual Heisman.
Yeah. What was it? I think that was the year Rashaan Salam won.
Yep.
So, yeah. Anyway, he was the 1AA total yards leader at the end of his career. And you're thinking, this is a very intriguing prospect. The NFL hadn't, as far as the modern age, had not seen somebody like him at that position before. Normally, there's guys at smaller schools or 1AA schools, like I had said before, for whatever reason, that are like, like a DB or a running back or a lineman.
Grades or whatever trouble gets them.
Or just they start football late.
Or they start football late is actually.
But you go through the combine and the scouting process and you're like, oh, okay, this guy was here for a reason that just, was whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But man, a 1AA quarterback coming out like this with all the hype train coming and oh, man.
And I bet some of the teams kept downplaying him, being like, well, he wasn't playing up against real competition, that kind of shit.
There's the competition aspect, and that's discussed. And that has validity as far as speed of the game and things like that. But there were also some men of their time, Chris.
Yep.
There were some men of their time like Bill Polian, who thought Lamar Jackson just recently should be a wide receiver. Well, those types of student athlete men of their time.
I'm just saying there's some coaches in Florida that were like, you pass the ball? No. We'll give you the ball and you run.
Could you imagine him and Spurrier's fun and gun offense? Because I think Spurrier was the coach the year after. So like 91
in 91,
was Spurrier's first year, so they probably didn't have a beat on him. Oh, my God.
That would have been insane.
That would have melted faces in the SEC. But anyway, so we're going into the 95 draft. It's expansion. I didn't want to point that out. So it's expansion with Carolina at the top, Jacksonville at 2, and Houston at number 3. Houston technically the worst team in the league.
Yep.
But
expansion they get. Yeah.
Because this night, what I didn't want to say, because it ties back to a past episode, the 94 Oilers are that gutted team we talked about in our 93 Oilers episode.
Oh,
Remember when I said Bud Adams, the owner, was like, this is it. None of you are coming back next year.
Yep.
That was the none of you are coming back next year team.
From Mighty Ducks.
Basically, yeah, the Coach Riley.
Yeah.
No spot on this team next year.
Yes. You lose this game, nobody's making the team next year.
It's not worth winning if you can't win big.
That's right.
So I did point out the Bill Polian BS, but I did want to bring up some stuff a former Oilers scout said, their GM, and then also covering the draft when I watched it, Theismann was excited about him, and Kuiper was excited about him. Both Theismann had worked with the coach where he'll eventually go when he was in Washington, who had also developed Troy Aikman.
Okay.
And Kuiper said the same thing as Theismann, where they're like, look, just sit him, get him updated to the speed of the game, but this dude is a special type of player. Houston's general manager, Floyd Reese, said he was the Michael Jordan of the 1995 draft.
That actually is a pretty accurate assessment on that.
And I did some digging, and I found this quote from the Oilers scout Glenn Cumby, who said,
Whoa.
"Ooh, this kid will be better than Steve Young, and he'll redefine the quarterback position. He can show every pass that's imaginable. I don't know where this dumb tag came from, but we put him through extensive classroom work, and he's one of the most intelligent players I've seen. He's one of the few guys I would actually pay to watch as a fan."
That's pretty wild, especially because he was 100% right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, sometimes you have these guys be like, this guy's going to change the position. And you're like, oh, no. Like, he really did morph it into something that it wasn't.
Definitely. So, first two picks are Jacksonville or Carolina Jackson. Carolina trades out so they can get their quarterback, their Kerry Collins quarterback, not Steve McNair. So they trade down to 5 with Cincinnati, takes Kajana Carter. Jaguars take Hall of Fame tackle Tony Baselli.
Oh, yeah, I saw that.
So
that's a good.
At number 3,
Yeah.
the Oilers are there. Moore and Moon's gone. You're not rowing with Bucky Richardson this year. No more Billy Jones. Basically, you want someone better.
Yes.
And they have a plan in place because they signed Chris Chandler to be the new starter, and they picked Steve 3 overall to be the guy of the future.
I was going to say, to literally put him in a position that he needs, which is sitting the first year and getting into the reps of, like we were saying, because I imagine it's just slightly faster.
Oh, for sure.
So,
and you're not running as necessarily a wide open of an offense.
Yep.
It's a little more, and it's definitely in Houston, and then later where they end up going much more conservative with a defensive head coach like Jeff Fisher and someone like Chris Chandler in front of you who saw just god-awful football in Indianapolis and Tampa Bay leading in. His mom had talked about him complaining, though, as far as not being able to play all the time. But she's like, just wait your turn. They drafted you that high. They're not going to not play you.
I was going to say, coming off of high school playing every down and then college playing every game, essentially, I bet that first year he's like, I just want to play. And they're just like, we'll get there.
No, we'll get there. Let Chandler take these beatings.
Yes. Seriously, though, it's such a smart thing where they're just like,
watch him and learn from him, but also we don't want you, and, we'll get into Steve later, I won't call it reckless, but he was a team guy who put his body on the line every single second that he was out on that field.
Which, when you're playing on a team like this and you see your quarterback that does that, it makes you want to play so much harder. And I've heard this from guys about Jimmy Garoppolo. Yeah. Where they said that they were like, well, we were going from Brady, who would break his ankle and still try and play, to Garoppolo, who hurt his shoulder once and was just like, I can't go out there, guys. It's just so tender.
Well, Tom Brady, he's got that whole Belichick luring him into a gingerbread house and sucking out their essence, like the Sanderson sisters in Hocus Pocus to keep him young.
Great reference.
I don't think Jimmy had that TB12 diet access to it.
Normally we reference sports kids movies, but Hocus Pocus is right up our alley.
That's in the same time frame.
Oh yeah,
as Mighty Ducks.
It's in the same world as Mighty Ducks.
It's Disney. You can watch both on Disney Plus.
You can see the witches in the stands at the finals.
Are we sponsored by Engle Studio and Disney Plus, Chris?
Oh, we should be.
So he's a backup in 95 and 96, which are the last 2 seasons that they're playing in Houston.
They're in Houston,
in Houston. Part of me has this conspiracy theory where Bud Adams didn't play him enough just to piss people in Houston off before he the one last bad thing.
Yeah, where literally he's like, yeah, this is our next star, and you guys don't ever get to watch it.
Like the Madonna thing, where it's like, oh, we're signing. Oh no, I know why we're doing that.
Yeah, so they go to Nashville where there's no oil.
So his first 2 seasons, I didn't want to add, he starts 6 games, has almost 1,800 yards passing and 9 touchdowns and a couple of TD runs. But by 97, I don't know if you read anything about their move, but it was wild. So when they go to Tennessee, they have to play their first year in Memphis.
Oh,
in 97 at the Liberty Bowl. So they don't have a home. They're basically like the vagabonds in the NFL. Chandler goes to Atlanta, so the job is Steve's now in 97. And in 98 as well, because the second season they go to Nashville, but their stadium's not ready, so they have to play at Vanderbilt. So they're playing in the Liberty Bowl in Vanderbilt, and they're getting outdrawn in all these games by opposing teams.
Yep.
Between the 2 years, he has almost 5,900 yards passing, 29 touchdowns, 23 picks. over 1,200 rushing yards and 12 touchdowns, and they've added Eddie George.
Yes, I saw that. So once they got Eddie George,
at running back,
it really opens up their offense.
And try as they might to find wide receivers, they've got Frank Wycheck, who's a Pro Bowl tight end. It's very ground and pound, and Steve also using his legs to buy time to throw and also just run people over.
Yeah.
So they're 16 and 16 both years, as I pointed out. So that's the Jeff Fisher special, the 500. 99 though, they're not even the Oilers anymore.
I was going to say they're the Titans.
They have a rocky start. I don't know if you heard about this in their first game. Cincinnati comes to town. They've booed Steve already in the game.
Yeah.
With 4 minutes to play and down 9, he scores 10. As a fan of a team in the same division, as a child, this man was the Michael Myers of quarterbacks. Until the great Satan Brady showed up, there was no quarterback I feared watching more than Steve McNair, because he would not just...
He could make things happen.
It's just... But the Titans are really good this year. They finally kind of pulled themselves together.
He had a little injury, I saw.
He did. He did.
Inflamed disc, which actually had to have surgery on, which a lot of people thought were going to really derail this season because they were like pretty good, but they ended up finishing the season 13-3, which
they were. You know what else they did at 13-3? They were the only team to beat the only 14-2 team twice.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
So the reason they're a wild card is Jacksonville was 14-2.
I saw that. I didn't know they were.
Two losses Jacksonville had was to Tennessee. One of the games Steve didn't start. What was it?
From the surgery.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So they make the playoffs. They get the wild card game at home, obviously, because you're the top wild card seed. You win 13 games. January 8th, 2000. Steve's first playoff game is one of the more memorable playoff games in NFL history.
It's such a great game. Like, watching these highlights makes me get so excited. I'm like, ooh, football's coming up.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing, you know what I mean? Because they're down 1 point.
2
points.
13.
15-13.
Or no, 16-15. You're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. With 16 seconds left, I was going to say, because I got all these 16s right here. With 16 seconds left, and it's such a great, just like, play for the tight end, right?
Well, okay, so what happens is Buffalo correctly squibs the kick down the field. Lorenzo Neal, their Pro Bowl fullback, picks it up and hands it off to Wycheck, their Pro Bowl tight end, who runs to one side of the field
and
throws it all the way. Some in Buffalo in Western New York would call that a forward pass.
Hey, you know what? Nashville is not opposed to controversy. This guy's going to be yelling in like 2 minutes.
Oh, yes, I will, Chris.
But yes, so he technically does a lateral, but it's the tight end, throws it across the field.
Kevin Dyson, the wide receiver,
catches it and goes 75 yards.
It was I love the Tennessee call on that one. There are no flags on the field. It's like the Pepper needs new shorts of the NFL. Here's a good spider web. So in the 1998 NFL draft, the Titans, or no, it would have been the Oilers.
Okay.
Pick Kevin Dyson in the first round, a wide receiver out of Utah. Do you know the wide receiver that was picked like 4 picks later?
No.
Randy Moss.
Oh, wow.
They picked Kevin Dyson with Randy Moss. Could you imagine a
Randy Moss
2000 offense with McNair, George, and Moss?
Jesus.
Sorry, I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah, that's so much speed and power.
Anytime since he's been in the NFL, every time I see Kevin Dyson, I call him not Randy Moss. Which is mean, but so they go to the divisional round. And they play the Colts, who also won 13 games.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is when the Colts are actually good.
And Steve plays an efficient game, but this is to me, this is always the Eddie George playoff game. He had 162 on the ground. A long line of Peyton Manning playoff miscues in this one. They end up winning 19-16. And they go to the AFC Championship. And who do they play, Chris?
I don't have who they played on the AFC Championship. Just kidding. Your boys.
No.
Oh, no?
Jacksonville.
Oh, this is next year. I'm sorry. You're right.
No. 3 years. It's not even in the championship, but
Okay.
But yeah,
Jacksonville.
They play Jacksonville
In their own division, who
Jacksonville has. They are coming off a 62-7 win over Miami, where they ended Dan Marino's career.
Yes.
Not even former kicker Ray Finkel could do that.
Finkel and Einhorn.
They were literally the laces. This '99 Jags team was the laces out of teams.
Yeah.
They're winning. Tennessee is down 14-10 at halftime, and in the second half, they scored 23 unanswered points. Granted, their defense was stout. They were really good over the course of these next few years. Steve in this game has 2 TD throws and a TD run, and they win 33-14,
which was surprising. I think a lot of people thought Jacksonville was going to go, and then they go to the Super Bowl to play the Rams.
I tell you what, if Jacksonville played any other AFC team in that game,
they would have smashed them.
Not only do I think they would have won, they probably would have beat
the Rams.
The Rams.
Yeah.
I mean, that game would have been a little bit different because I think that would have been a shootout because Brunell had Smith and McCardell. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, Tennessee just had their number, and I think that's the familiarity factor.
Well, like you said, they had beat them 2 times. And they were the only, you know what I mean? So you're just like, yeah, that kind of makes sense that those teams just match up against each other favorably for the Titans.
Duval, you're not allowed to have nice things. That's all I'm going to say.
True.
Super Bowl 34 in Atlanta, though. We go there. And, man, Steve and the Titans struggle. I can guarantee you they wish they had those first 3 quarters back.
It was a very low yardage, low scoring.
Their defense, I will say, kept them in this game because St. Louis had to kick 3 field goals in the first half, and I think they missed one on a bet. Like, if St. Louis converted even 1 or 2 extra of these opportunities, we wouldn't even be talking about this game.
About this last play.
About this last quarter.
Yeah, I mean, really. Because it really is a comeback that...
So with just under 24 minutes to play in the game, they're down 16-0, but the D doesn't let up. George and McNair go absolutely bonkers in this second half, and they tie it at 16.
I feel like we'd be talking about this if they finish the comeback more. Do you know what I mean? Where like it's one of those.
I mean,
that's what I mean. It's one of those comebacks that literally gets stopped right at the goal line, where you're like, oh, that's right there.
You're just like, oh no,
oh no.
So Warner has a TD to Isaac Bruce. That's the iconic play from this game.
Yeah,
is the Warner to Bruce touchdown with just under 2 minutes. Starting at their own 12, the Titans only 1 timeout, and the ball's in Steve's hands. And people talk like it's a cliche about leaving it all on the field. His team and him left it all on the field on that final drive, to be honest with you. He goes 6-9. Has 14 yards of rush. There's a couple iconic plays where he's just shaking off defensive linemen.
I was just going to say, there are these plays where he literally should be getting sacked, and he's just like, nope.
There are 31 teams in the NFL. The other 30 quarterbacks, none of them escape that. 0.
Yes.
On 3rd and 5 at the 26, he gets a 16-yard completion to Dyson, and they call a timeout with 5 seconds left. And at the 10, they call one. So the way the Rams defense is, you're putting everyone along the goal line. We'll concede anything, but you're not like we'll play off coverage.
Yes.
And as the Titans, you have to recognize that and go, either Steve's going to fit it into a window or somebody's going to need to make an incredible effort. Throws a slant to Dyson, and he gets where, Chris?
Stopped on the goal line.
Oh.
Like literally on the 1 or 2 where you're like, it's so close to this unbelievable comeback and really the only chance he has at a Super Bowl. So it's like that thing too where you're just like, oh man, some people get blown out, the Bills, and then
Broncos, almost everyone.
Yep, but sometimes you literally lose by a yard, and
they call it a game of inches, Chris.
It's true.
It's true. The next year, the offense finally starts to open up a bit because they hire Mike Heimerdinger, the receivers coach from Denver.
Oh, interesting.
They brought him in as the offensive coordinator, and this is when you start seeing Steve's best seasons as far as productivity as a passer. 2000
to 2004, pretty much.
Yep.
Is his where you're just like, oh yes, he is one of the elite quarterbacks. I was going to call him a cornerback.
He could have been.
I know.
If he wanted to. You go play for the Gators. So this year, he has a fantastic season. over 2,800 passing yards, 15 touchdowns, 403 on the ground. Makes his first Pro Bowl. Go 13-3. That year, though, I did a couple of things I wanted to bring up. In week 2 against the Chiefs, he suffers a sternum injury. And he told his mom it was the only time he was ever afraid of being hurt. Because his brothers would always joke, even his teammates would joke, the only way he's not going to play is if he's not breathing.
Yeah.
And he told his mom he couldn't breathe. And he said, I think I want to retire. And she said, well, if you're going to quit on a good note. So the next week, he's sidelined. He's active, but he's sidelined in Pittsburgh, right? And I will never forget this shit show.
I was going to say, because Pittsburgh, or the Titans are actually playing
It's after a bye week, so it's 2 weeks later.
An ex-Pittsburgh quarterback.
Oh, yes. And during the game, so in this game.
your volume's starting
to
Chris.
go up. I will credit this game as being the one that turned it around for the aughts, but it hurts so much to talk about.
Yeah.
So, Neil O'Donnell, the guy that threw 2 picks to wide open Larry Brown, which wouldn't have been a problem if he didn't play for the freaking Cowboys. He's hurt in 3 Rivers. He's iced out of the game. It's like, I don't think my penis could get any harder than it is right now. And then in that split second where you're like, oh my God, I'm at completion level, you're like, Steve McNair's coming into the game. God damn it.
Doesn't he come in with like 4 minutes left?
Oh God, Chris. Oh God.
After really the offense was struggling the whole game.
They had him. They freaking had him. Oh, they freaking had him. And then he throws the touchdown to Aaron Kinney to put him up 23-20, and they win that game. And it would, like I told you, he's Michael Myers. He just doesn't. He just
doesn't stop. You throw him out the window. You're like, where did he go?
So they're the AFC's best team. They have the number 1 seed. They're absolutely fantastic. They do have kind of one hole on this roster because they have one of the best O-lines in the league. They got George. They got Lorenzo Neal as a Pro Bowl fullback. They got Wycheck at tight end. Derek Mason is their best wide receiver. Okay. Derek Mason had a very nice career in the NFL with Tennessee and later Baltimore. He's a number 2 at best. They didn't have that one true dominant guy. Yancey Thigpen was always hurt. Carl Pickens was on this team. Chris Sanders and Dyson, they were all injured or ineffective. And they get the first round bye, and they draw Baltimore, which is crappy because up till this point, they have not lost a game at their stadium in Nashville. The only time they've lost is to Baltimore.
Oh, yeah.
And you're coming, and Baltimore's hot. I think the last game Baltimore lost that year was to Pittsburgh in a game where no touchdowns were scored.
Oh shit, yeah. Because
they've won like 8 or 9 in a row.
This is when the Baltimore defense was like ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
like you could have put a ham sandwich in at quarterback and you're at least tying the game.
Yeah.
So January 17th, 2001, they're playing Baltimore there in the divisional round. They're tied 10-10 in the 4th quarter. But then special teams screws them. They get a blocked field goal return for a touchdown. Baltimore does.
Yeah.
And then as they're trying to come back, McNair tries to hit George on this route out of the backfield. And it kind of clangs off him, and Ray Lewis takes it the other way. It was the dagger. He threw the ball 46 times in this game, and you just can't do that.
No.
In the barely over 200 yards of offense. That's just not the style of play you've done all year.
Yep.
The following season, they go 7-9 just because the division's so tough. Did want to add almost 3,400 passing yards in 21. So he's getting better every single season. 61.3 completion percentage, 5 touchdowns rushing. And we'll get into 2002.
I was just gonna ask, are we getting into 2002 where your heart breaks?
So when we talk about the game, I have a couple interesting stories about this.
All right. So they finished the season 11-5.
They started 1-4.
I saw that. You just don't remember that kind of shit where you're like, oh damn, they went like 10-1.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Oh, man, they were hot. 22 touchdowns passing, 440 yards on the ground. They have the number 2 seed, so they get a bye.
Yep.
January 11th, 2003, Pittsburgh comes to town. You know what game that got them there?
No.
The one we did an episode on against Cleveland.
Oh, cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah, nice.
So, I'll always remember this game, but I never saw it live. Do you know why?
No.
That bit I do about wrestling a blind individual.
Oh.
I was in Bennett, Colorado that day, and
Beaten up on the blind.
I was, yes. But anyway, I never watched it. So I basically had to have my headphones in the entire time because people were talking about the playoff games that were happening that day. And I'm like, la, 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 don't tell me. Like, I don't want to know. I've rewatched it. My mom taped it for me, and I wish I'd never rewatched this game. But it's one of the best divisional. It's such an underrated, exciting game. And Steve is a stud.
Very exciting,
stud.
Very controversial.
So it's just back and forth. Offense just going back. Not a lot of defense in this one, considering, how good Tennessee's was and how crappy the Steelers was that season. Steve goes for 338 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, and then also another on the ground in the first quarter. And they end regulation 31 up.
Yeah.
31 up. They go to overtime.
So it is tied.
So it's tied, and Tennessee drives into field goal range.
Go to kick a field goal.
Joe Nedney, their kicker, misses it.
But he was touched on the ankle.
He was not touched anywhere at all. Watch the replay.
It really is one of those things where I remember people being like, why are we having replay? And it's like, because these exact plays where you literally go back and you're like, oh, he wasn't even touched a little bit.
I mean, the acting is Kevin Costner level bad in a Western, I should say. Baseball, okay. Western, not so good.
Oh, you're going to call him Kevin Spacey. I was like, all right, let's calm
hell
down.
No, I'm not going no.
Whoa.
No. Fuck Kevin Spacey.
Kevin Costner and the Postman. You guys know what I'm talking about.
Oh, my God.
It's one of the greatest.
Well, they just delivered depression into my heart because Nedney fakes falling down when Dwayne Washington comes across the formation. They call it roughing the kicker, and he gets a chip shot field goal and makes it. They win 34-31.
Now, the second...
Joe Nedney, I hope you're servicing men at a glory hole outside in a fucking Checkers in Birmingham. Fuck you.
The second kick, the Steelers coach, it was before Tomlin. Who was it?
It was Cower.
It was Cower. Literally said, I told the ref timeout right before they snapped it.
That too.
And he was like, yeah, we're just not going to do that. We're just going to play. It's like, that's not how this game is played.
It's almost as if Las Vegas was involved somehow. Oh, God. Oh, I hate that Bob Barker.
Oh, God, I hate that Bob Barker.
God, I hate that Joe Nedney. All right, so January 19th, 2003, they make the AFC title game. They play the Raiders. He gets them down. Steve plays a great first 3 quarters of football,
and then
keep them in.
I was going to say, and then they kind of get blown out.
No, this is the Timmy Brown Rice one.
Yep,
and they lose 41-24. Later this offseason, Steve gets a DUI
and gun possession, but later dropped. Which I tried to look more into that as to how it was dropped, because they said I think they said his blood alcohol was like 0.009.
Yeah.
Or something that really shouldn't have been considered that. But then the gun possession, too.
Yeah.
Where you're like, that's a pretty big felony.
That's a big one there. It said, this is when people started finally finding out he's self-medicating.
Yes.
Because, as we said before, he's one of the toughest quarterbacks that it's ever played professional football. Like, he had the Roethlisberger, the Cam Newton treatment, where it was big tree, fall hard. The refs didn't give a shit about his safety. And also, he put himself into a lot of positions where he would get rocked for the betterment of his team, but not the betterment of himself.
Like you said, he was a type of player that would leave it all on the field, and you don't normally see that with quarterbacks where they're like, well, I'll get it on the next play.
Jeff Fisher had a great story, though, I just wanted to add, where he told Steve, you need to think about sliding. And he said, okay, if it's a passing play and I'm scrambling, I'll slide or I'll run out of bounds.
Yeah.
But if you call QB draw, I'm not going to slide.
Yeah, I'm running like a running back. And you're just like, that's awesome.
That's just, he was such a badass.
I know, seriously.
I just wish he played for another team.
Other team.
Just don't. I'll haunt your dreams. So the next year they have an even better record, 2003.
And he goes off.
He's amazing.
And this is where because he, just to be clear, he does win co-MVP with Peyton Manning. But I feel like a lot of people thought they were just like, oh, he should have taken that.
Was it Steve McNair who threw to Reggie Wayne, Marvin Harrison, Dallas Clark, and Edgerrin James? No.
Oh.
It's almost like the media.
It's almost like he had a stack.
Wants free shit to be given to Peyton Manning.
Yeah, no shit.
And Eddie George is like at the end right now. I mean, as far as
this is his twilight years.
So he makes the Pro Bowl, obviously. Over 3,200 passing yards, career high in touchdowns. He leads the AFC in yards per attempt, yards per completion, and a 100.4 quarterback rating. Also 4 TDs on the ground.
Yep.
They have a This was another. God, all the playoff games they played in were so awesome. They played Baltimore for the wild card.
For the wild card, yeah.
And this was like Eddie George and Steve's kind of mostly for Eddie George because he trucked Ray Lewis in this game. It was like the last game. The defenses basically reigned supreme. Has a TD pass in the first half to Justin McCarron's, but it comes all the way down to the wire, and Gary Anderson wins the game. I bet you a lot of Minnesota fans were like, "Come on, Gary." You had one job, Gary, and you do it for the Titans. Anyway, the next week, they go to New England.
Yeah, to face the Pats.
And if there was one that got away, it was this one. I really think they probably could have won this
They should have won that,
They should have won it. Vinatieri has a last, probably like 4 minutes to go, has a field goal to put him up 17-14. And McNair almost has a bomb to Drew Bennett work towards the end where it could have really changed it. But they end up losing.
Yeah.
They end up losing to the future Super Bowl champions. And now we get into the end of his Titans career.
Yeah, because 2004, he plays 9 games.
He's got a bruise. Did you hear that they took bone from his hip?
From his hip.
And put it in his chest to make it go. He's like bionic.
I know.
Oh, my God. 2005, he makes the Pro Bowl despite a hip injury. 3,100 passing yards and 16 touchdowns, but they're 4-10. George is already gone. Wycheck's gone. Basically, they have to napalm everything.
Yeah,
because they're crappy, and
they have to rebuild.
Steve is caught in the crossfire of this because he's still productive as a quarterback
and has a pretty big contract.
And that's the other thing with the salary cap. Does not end on a very happy note for him in Tennessee, which I think is, I get the economics of it. So I'm not shitting on the organization. It's just kind of how it happened and how you treat. I always separate them from the Oilers as an organization, but how you treat your franchise's first star. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, so just to be clear, in the offseason, they locked him out of facilities so he couldn't go and rehab at their facility.
Yeah.
That was later found a violation of his contract.
Of course.
Because that's like ridiculous. And then that allowed him to be traded.
Wouldn't that just inspire you to trade him faster?
Yeah.
Or like say, hey, do you want to take a pay cut? And like, let's work something out. Not just be like, padlock the
they literally took away his code so he couldn't get in.
Why isn't my card working? Oh, I'm getting fired.
Oh, I'm getting fired.
So he's traded in the offseason to Baltimore.
Yeah, Ravens, which is kind of surprising, I thought. But
I'm going to be honest, this one didn't shock me because this version of the Ravens was pretty ready-made. Literally the only thing that they didn't have was a quarterback.
Oh,
because the Kyle Bowler experiment was just terrible. They'd gotten through with Anthony Wright in 2003, but they had really been struggling to find the next guy. The defense, as it's always been, was great, but you still had Jamal Lewis. You had Todd Heap, the Storm and Mormon at tight end, and you had some decent but not great receivers. I think this is when finally Mason goes there.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So,
because this is a good season for them.
Well, that's why I said it never shocked me. It was just like, we just need a stopgap until we figure this out for a younger guy.
Yeah.
So, 2006, they were incredible. They won 13 games in the AFC North. He has a career high for completion percentage, over 3,000 yards passing, 17 total touchdowns, and they score a home playoff. The only team that's better than them in 2006, I think, is, what was it? The Chargers.
Oh, okay.
That Breeze and Tomlinson team.
Yeah.
That Marty balled their way out of the playoffs. So January 13th, 2007, they play the Colts, which that had to be a mind fuck to see the Colts coming back to Baltimore for a postseason game.
Yep.
Like, oh God.
And I think this is his McNair's only one of his playoff games that was not great.
this was a disaster. And it was, to me, I never saw this one coming because literally up until the wild card round, Indianapolis had the worst defense in the NFL.
Yeah.
And then they, for whatever reason, just turned it on.
Just locked it in against the Ravens, who had a great offense.
And to Baltimore's credit, they gave up 15 points. They didn't allow a single touchdown in this game.
Yeah, I know.
It was literally 5 Vinatieri field goals, 2 Stover field goals. The winning team has more.
Yep.
Like, he threw 2 picks, though, in this game, which was kind of crappy. The following year, you could tell it was the end. There was that Monday nighter in Pittsburgh where James Harrison ate everybody's lunch, and you could just tell we got to turn this around. It was a season that got Billick fired.
Oh, yeah.
This is what brought in John Harbaugh and Unibrow Flacco. But he was only 2-4 as a starter that year. He retired the next April.
I was going to say, because he played 6 games, and then pretty much just, you could just see where it's like, Baltimore was done, and I bet after 13 seasons, as the way he played quarterback, that's what I mean. Where you're just like, oh, yeah, I couldn't do that for 2.
No, I can do that for a quarter.
I was going to say, I meant 2 games.
So we get into his retirement, and he's going back to doing what he was doing during the summers. All throughout his career, he had the Steve McNair football camp, which 11,000 kids went through those camps there in Mississippi. Guys like Cam Newton, Heisman winner, Troy Smith, Heisman winner, Vince Young. In fact, on June 26, 2009, they did an interview with him, and he said, I enjoy life now that I'm retired. Just going back to, his farm. Fishing.
Yeah.
And being a quiet guy with his family.
Yeah, and having winters off and,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But then July 4th, 2009 happens, Chris, and we find out some stuff and some things.
So he is married, but he also has a girlfriend.
Yes, he does.
And, that's right up my alley. Him and his girlfriend had some problems where, like, she got arrested once, and he wouldn't go talk to her in the police car. And then right after that, so after she got out, she was trying to sell her Kia, and to the guy she was selling it to bought unlicensed firearm.
Exactly.
Just to foreshadow. And then the day that they met up, there was like little text between them, like it was like, I love you, or something like that, and whatever. And she met him up at his house, I think.
No, I think he came over.
He came over to her house. Okay, you're right. And she ended up shooting him 4 times and then shooting herself in the head.
First of all, if you want more information on this, there are tons of true crime podcasts about it. This is more sports related, but there's a lot of ins, a lot of outs, a lot of what happens.
I was going to say, I wanted to graze it because I kept getting lost in rabbit holes where they were like, we don't think it was her. And
it was very Dale Gribbly. You can get very Dale Gribbly with what we're talking about here as far as conspiracies and things like that. But the official story is shot him 4 times, shot herself. And when it was reported, I will never forget, myself personally, I was like, he had a side. You would have never pegged him for that type of lifestyle or just anything like that. If I thought Steve McNair was going to die, I thought he'd be like fighting a bear.
Yeah.
Like just
maybe drunk driving. He got a couple.
Well, that's true. Maybe something like that. But what I mean is this was such a weird end.
Yes, and it was so close to the end of his career. That's the other thing that is so weird because it was literally like, oh, he retired last year, and then he had
18 months.
Yeah, 18 months, and then it because he's still on your thought as to a quarterback in the NFL. You know what I mean? Where it's almost like an active player gets murdered. Pretty much.
I mean, at that point. So Steve McNair, though, that's just a very tragic end. He's a trailblazer, and we're going to do an episode next on a guy who probably benefited,
yeah.
3-time Pro Bowler, 1-time MVP, over 31,000 yards passing.
I know.
31,304 passing yards, 3,590 rushing yards, 174 TD passes, 37 touchdown rushes. College Football Hall of Famer in 2020, which much deserved.
Do you think he'll be NFL Hall of Famer? I don't know if he has the. He's one of the guys.
Yes, it's to me it's borderline only because the no Super Bowls. the TD pass number is really low, and he lost some seasons due to injury or at the beginning with Houston, and
That's
the
true.
game hadn't. And you're playing in those Jeff Fisher teams where Eddie George is toting the rock. Like, to me, he scared the shit out of me more than any other quarterback named Brady. But I don't think you can get those, bean counter numbers people.
I agree, because I feel like he's literally one of those guys who is just like, no, fantastic. He's just not going to get. And you're just like, that kind of sucks.
It sucks, but gosh, what a talent he was. What a guy he was.
He really was. And some of the best playoff games that broke this man's heart.
Yes, they did.